For the second part of this video, I'm going to be looking at the skin tones for the Lady in a Pearl earring, and the colours that I'm going to use are very simple, just titanium white, your primary red and your yellow ochre with some burnt umber as well. So I'm going to start on the area on her forehead. What I've done before I began was I very sort of quickly and roughly put in, just using burnt umber, the different tones on her face so I can see where the light and dark areas. I started with the darkest areas and then worked to the lighter areas. Now I'm going to start on her forehead and with this sort of quite light tone, and I'm going to just focus on thinking about the contours of the brush strokes to actually describe the form of her head and face. Now, different people will start in different areas. I mean, it is up to you where you start. You might want to start with her darker tones at the side of the face. Why I'm doing this now is because I want to be able to transition and blend into the darker tones. So rather than going from dark to light, I am going from a lighter tone to a darker tone and graduating it slowly. So as I come down the side of her face here, excuse me, I'm gradually going a little bit darker, and I will add in slightly more burnt umber. And it's a process of graduating, so this slow process will probably be done several times because the face itself is very smooth in the way that it's painted, and we want to recapture that in our own paintings. So as I gradually come down here, I'm going slightly darker. I'm going to bring in slightly more burnt umber. To really reflect the darkness of that shadow and the contrast between that and the light on her face. Also, the shape of the shadow is very important, to see the shapes that it makes on her face. Now that's probably the darkest point there. So I'm going to gradually, as I come round her chin, go slightly lighter. And as I gradually come round here, it's going to go lighter again. So I'm literally working in a very sort of methodical way, showing where these sort of darker areas are. Now the other area I'm going to put in is by the nose, which is not quite as dark as the side of her face there. So I'm going to use a slightly lighter tone. And that graduates across the top of her eyelid, eyebrow, and it becomes lighter too. So as I said in the other video, I'm working with a very shiny surface. So you may be working on a canvas, but whatever your surface is, you are going to have to really try and transition the tones carefully and gradually. This area here is starting to become slightly less in shadow, but there is a pink tinge to the skin as well. So I'm graduating from that pink to a slightly lighter tone. So this side here, on the side of her nose as well, is in shadow. So we're going to just pop that in slightly darker. All of this side of the face is much lighter, except for obviously we need to look at the side of the nose. And the nostril is definitely darker as well, so I'm going to put that in with some burnt umber. While I'm working on this side of the head, I'm going to look at that area under her chin, the side of her neck. Just transition in a slightly darker tone. And this sits around by the earring, so we need to be very careful when we're painting that little bit there. The ear as well is in shadow. So there will be a lot of blending and a lot of moving the paint gradually till we get the tones that we can see in the original. So she's definitely much darker around the edge here, her neck, the back of the earring. So I'm going to put in now, for this side of the face, a much paler tone. So I'm using much more white. And I've got a slight shadow underneath her eye there. So it's all a matter of really looking very, very carefully at where these lighter, darker tones are. So all the areas I will revisit and have a look. For instance, this area here of her neck is much lighter, so I'm going to pop that in. And notice the angles and the shapes of the shadows as well. The eyes themselves are very, very tricky in terms of that you will need a tiny brush. And if you look at, start with her pupils, so you're going to take just pure black. And you're going to look very carefully at where the light hits the pupil. And make sure you leave that. And I'm just going to leave the board white. And for the outer edges of her iris, I'm mixing a very pale bluey green. So I'm mixing ultramarine with a tiny bit of yellow ochre and white. And it might be worth you just waiting for that area to dry before you put that colour in, but I'm just showing you the colour. So it's a very sort of light greeny colour, which we're going to work into a bit more with a finer brush. So the earring itself is very much a part of that area, so I'm going to talk you through that as well. So I'm going to emulate sort of like the silvery colours, but I'm going to just mainly focus on the shapes of the tone. And how they sit and where they sit. So again, I'm going to leave the board white where the light is strongest. I'm using a tiny little bit of black with white for the darker shadows. And I'm curving my brush to show the shape as well. This is another area that I'm going to come back to. I'd like to look at the, while the eyes are still drying and the skin tones are dry, is the tone of the mouth. So I'm going to use a tiny bit of my primary red and a tiny bit of yellow ochre and white. And again, looking at where the different tones sit. So we have got shadow on the lip and we have got light. So I'm going to leave some of the lip with a lot less paint on. And again, we'll come back to that and add some more tones when it's dry. So the eyes themselves, as I said, are going to be something in themselves that we're going to do paint. I want to go back to the skin tones now and just bring in slightly stronger, lighter tone. Just where I see those really light areas. So I'm going to finish this off and come back to another video showing you the finished face, so that I will have hopefully blended this more so that it's transitioning from one tone to the other more subtly. And then I will talk to you through about how I finished the eyes and also the clothing. So it's important to let layers dry before you go on to the next layer, so that you have a smoother surface as you can possibly make your paint. So any sort of extra lines that I have got here, I'm going to try and smooth out. When you look at the original, you can just see just how subtle it is. So this is going to take me a bit of time to work into and to create that sort of smoothness and transitions of tone.